Hello, everyone. Welcome back to MONEV Podcast. MONEV Podcast is a discussion and learning channel where practitioners, policymakers, and learners share their knowledge and experiences on monitoring and evaluations. Let's learn, share, and grow in M&E together. Do you have any input or topic suggestions? Send us your questions to info@monevstudio.org or download our MONEV 4.0 app on your Play Store and App Store.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MONEV Podcast. My name is Haida Misa, and I'm your host today for today's episode. At MONEV Studio, we're committed to creating spaces where practitioners, policymakers, and learners can exchange knowledge and experiences on monitoring and evaluation. In this episode, we're going to dive into the theme of results based monitoring and evaluation, or RBME. We will explore what it means, why it matters, and how it can be applied to achieve measurable and sustainable results in different sectors. I'm truly delighted to welcome our guest today, Prof. Dr. Romeo Santos. He is one of the leading figures in the field of evaluation, particularly in Asia. He is the former president of the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association and a board member of the International Organization for Cooperation in Evaluation. He currently serves as executive director of the Workland M&E Institute, a nonprofit think tank in the Philippines that strengthens evaluation capacity across the public sector, private sector, and civil society. Prof. Romeo has been active globally, including serving on the European Evaluation Society's working group and as a long-standing member of IDEAS. He is also a Fulbright scholar, a former visiting professor in the United States, and completed his PhD in architectural engineering with a focus on project management and economics in Japan. With, with over 2 decades of experience across academia, international development, and industry, he is recognized for his expertise in results based monitoring and evaluation and strategic planning. Welcome, Prof. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Can you give some greetings to the audience?
Uh, Hello, everyone. Good evening here. And I think good morning there.
Yes.
I'm Romeo Santos, and I have a great pleasure joining you today and to discuss things that we can learn from. I hope I can measure up to their expectation, and I hope I could address the questions to be given by Kairo Nisa. Thank you very
Oh,
much for this opportunity.
thank you so much, Prof. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today. So, Prof. Romeo, before we get into today's topic, I'd love to start with a little warm up. You mentioned that you've been active in the field of monitoring and evaluation for quite some time, right? So, could you share with us how long you've been working in this space and what first made you interest into it?
Well, I remember I started in around year 2000. Uh, the thing that caused me to have interest in this is that in 1999 up to 2001, our department in the college uh, received a project from JICA, funded by the Japanese government, for a development study in a very fast urbanizing city. So as I was made a team leader of a 13 member team, and to my surprise, when I was finishing the project, which was funded by around 44,000 US dollars. There was this, requirement in the report that was asked of me. There was this monitoring and evaluation part. And I was surprised because that was foreign to me. That's strange to me the first time I heard that there should be something like that. So I researched a bit and found out that there was this uh, evaluation, monitoring and evaluation that is beginning to sprout actually during the time year 2000, yeah, even in the Philippines. So I researched very well about that, and later my interest grew, and then I found myself here now in results-based monitoring evaluation, and I got a scholarship from World Bank uh, to get a course in if death, and that started in 2008. So this is 2025 from 2000. That would be 25 years.
25 years. Yeah, so we've been in this field around 25 years, which is such a long time ago. Wow, that's very cool. And I also heard that you have a particular focus on results-based monitoring and evaluation, which is our main topic today. Could you tell us what made you concentrate on that approach specifically?
Well, results-based monitoring evaluation is very popular and actually the main line of practice in the new M&E practice or monitoring and evaluation. It started in around, middle of 1980s to 1990s when there was this practice in the business and the corporate business, the RBM, results-based management, right? And from there, it was born the results-based monitoring and evaluation that became popular from 1990s, early 1990s until now, and eh, the practice was progressing, and almost every sector or agencies became interested in this, and so the uptake, uh, the implementation and the interest of many government bodies, including other agencies, international agencies, to apply this, especially the UN agencies and the World Bank.
Okay, so it's getting more interesting on how actually RBME is plays what is it, important role in the field of monitoring and evaluation. Thank you, Prof. Romeo. That's a really interesting story on how you came to focus on results-based monitoring and evaluation. Since you've highlighted why this approach is so central, so let's let's take a step back for our audiences, our listeners. Let's
Okay.
start with the basics. Could you briefly explain what results-based monitoring and evaluation is, and how it differs from traditional M&E and why it is important for achieving meaningful outcomes?
Well, let's go back to the meaning of evaluation. There are many definitions, but I would stick to the one that we know. It's about a an analytical process of getting the merit or determining the merits or worth of any intervention. And we know what interventions are. Interventions are like projects, programs, and any initiative of any agencies or bodies. So we are doing the implementing the projects or the programs or policies, for instance, and we know what happened to that policy or to that program or project. Do we achieve our goal in using our resources and implementing our activities to get the objectives or the goals of the project. Now, results based is actually a new one, considered to be a new philosophy in doing business, because I have mentioned a while ago, it came from RBM, which was actually a practice in corporate management and some other, uh, management agency, management in many big organizations. So RBM came from management by objectives, MBO, and then RBM, and then we adopted it in monitoring evaluation. Evaluation puts some kind of metrics in order to measure, so to speak, in and in quotation marks, measure the worth or the merit of any intervention, policy, program, or project. So it's kind of, it can be quantitative, it could be qualitative, both of them being used, as we say, metrics. And results-based monitoring evaluation is looking at the outcomes or the results, and that includes the impact. And outcomes is a general word that would include, the impact, which is the long term, and then we go to the mid-term, and then the short term. Whenever we implement intervention, there are some results, outcomes that are expected when we plan and decide the programs or the intervention. And that is results-based M&E. We want to see whether the goal that was set from the beginning of a policy or program is being achieved. Kind of. So that's where we see if it's successful or not. That's actually the main concept in that. We focus on the results or the outcome.
Oh,
And you mentioned about traditional M&E, right? Yeah, in the past, we used to implement projects, programs, and policies based on the objective that's with it, and implement it, use the resources. In economics, we have that we call it the inputs or the resources, man, material, machines, and so on. So we identify activities just like in any work program, and those activities consume the resources that we have: the money, machine, material, man, time, and so on. But we don't look at the results. We go by the checking whether we attain the the output, which is different from the outcomes. The output means, for instance, I'll give you a good example. If we design plan for, say, a physical project, a bridge, or 100-kilometer road, traditional M&E would only consider whether the road or the bridge is delivered physical output. That's the output that we have. And it's very easy to measure, but we don't look at the results, which or the outcomes, which are more of the higher degree of results. Meaning, if we program or plan, design that project of a bridge, of course, why do we plan and design for the bridge and implement it? We want, of course, the people to benefit from it, to increase household income, something like that, to increase activity, economic activity, or even people satisfaction about the project. We don't measure that as much in the traditional way. That's the big difference. The traditional looks at the output. The results-based monitoring and evaluation looks at the outcomes or results. Mhm.
okay. So that's a very good start up
Oh, thank you.
from the first question. So because I'm also new in the field of monitoring and evaluation. So I got so many what is it, new perspective from you, from you. So thank you so much. And from your perspective, what are the key principles or essential elements that make up the RBME approach?
Well, the key principles there is that why do we do RBME? Actually, we want accountability, transparency, and of course, one of the bigger parts is learning. We want to learn from that experience of implementing programs or policies or projects. So we want to show accountability because we use resources of people, right? Man, machine, money. What else? So if we use people's money and consume that money and other resources by the activities that we identified, we should show that the action produces the results that we want to achieve. not only the physical output or the deliverable. And that's where results-based monitoring come in. So that's the best principle. Other principle would be, of course, one of the basic that I understand is that change is measurable. In any implementation of intervention at all, there is always change. And we accept that change is measurable, quantitatively or even qualitatively. Now, if we cannot measure change, there's no monitoring and evaluation at all. Why do we have to go through this discussion? So we accept that change is measurable. And in results-based monitoring and evaluation, we want to look at the theory of change, which is at the core or the heart of, you know, how or and why we do implementation of interventions. We want to achieve something that we desire, desirable target or the main goal that we have. And that's the reason why we intervene in the first place. We do not want the status quo. The reason why we intervene is that we see a problem and then we don't want the problem to stay like that. So we intervene, we put our resources, we identify tasks, activities, so on, and we want to change it for the something better. And RBME would lead us to see whether we achieve that situation of something better. That's it. And theory of change, as I have, I mentioned it at once, is that it's a kind of, the theory. It's a kind of a theory of how we achieve our goal. It's a kind of a pathway, causal pathway toward achieving that goal, and that's kind of a theory. In any implementation or in any intervention at all, there is some kind of theory. It may be different depending on the one who makes it or the organization who makes it. And that's it. Mhm. Okay?
Okay, Prof. Romeo. So, if I may highlight one key point for our listeners, results-based monitoring and evaluation is really about shifting the focus from activities to actual change. It's not enough to know that a project delivered its planned outputs. We also want to understand whether those efforts created the outcomes we intended, right? like
Yeah.
like maybe stronger institutions or better livelihoods or more inclusive growth. And at its heart, this approach rests on three principles, which the one you mentioned: accountability, transparency, and learning.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's such a good explanation that I think more the listeners will understand easier by your explanation, because like I'm new in the monitoring and evaluation, and I got your point like so easily. Okay, so
But it seems you know very well about RBME
oh.
because you can easily summarize it.
Oh, okay. So now let's talk about the process. Could you walk us through the main steps or stages in implementing RBNE, from planning to implementation and to completion, and
Okay.
how organizations can select the right indicators for measuring results?
Okay, what you're talking about is kind of the bigger scenario, right? Establishing an RBMNE system in an organization or your office. There is another scenario wherein you have to apply RBMNE in a particular program, in a particular project, or in a particular policy. But what you're talking about is establishing the system, right? For instance, the government of Indonesia or Jakarta, city of Jakarta. But of course, the national system, or even in the Philippines, the national government RBMNE system. That's big, actually. So what we need to do is, of course, we have to understand the context, the condition of the government, if we want to set up the government or any agency at all, right? That is what we call needs assessment. We want to know the readiness of this organization, what they have right now, if they are able to sustain or even start the results-based monitoring and evaluation. So that's part of it. Yeah. we want to do an analysis of the current situation of the organization, their readiness, their gaps, their deficiencies, their strength. That's it. Now, second would be, of course, it's like strategic planning. Part of the planning and, of course, the for design and development is that, of course, you have to identify your main objectives and goal. Mhm. Otherwise, you don't have a destination, right? What is your destination? What do you want to achieve? Because one of the things, parts of the principles that you want to know whether what do you want to do? What's the end of it? What's the target that you want to do? Otherwise, you cannot go off the road, for instance, if you don't know where you are going, right? So you have to know what place or what state of things do you want to have. For instance, do you want to address reduce poverty, something like that, impacts, or to improve the life situation of the Jakarta population, the residents, something like that. And that's part of the step. Identify the goals and objectives, of course, of course identify the problem. And later, uh, everything the next steps would be, of course, the a little more deeper part of it. So it includes, of course, collaboration. The different sectors should be included in the table, including perhaps the executive, even the middle management, so that there would be kind of a good ownership of this task of establishing the results-based system. And then, of course, the next would be um, how do we call that? The next step would be when you have the goal, then there must be, of course, putting in the resources that you need. Based on the study on the first, you will identify what you have, right? And then you plan and design the RBME. Yeah, you have the goal, okay? And part of it would be identifying the theory of change. What kind of theory of change would be involved in the national government? Yeah, I mean, identifying the pathway to that desirable goal or the destination that you want. So it will be, the detailed part of the RBME. You will have to determine your resources that you put in there, identify the main activities, how you would put that in. Now, if that is a very big, organization, just like a country's RBMNE, of course, there are different sectors of the government. You have the public works, you have the education, you have the military, and then everything, right? That must go into that. And different agencies would have their own RBMNE, sub RBMNE that would have a goal that is tied in or bounding around the main goal of the national RBMNE. So then you have to identify, if you are good with the theory of change already, you have to identify outcome statements, right? After identifying the output, you have to identify the outcome statements. And from that outcome statements, including the impacts, you identify the indicators. Identify the indicator. And that's a bit difficult part. The indicators would be, of course, quantitative indicators. There can be qualitative. Of course, the criteria that you will have to set up, if you would base it in the criteria by the DAC criteria, which has 6 criteria. And of course, how your data would go into it. Baseline data, for instance, and of course, the monitoring data, and there are other data that would come into the picture. How would you process that in order to give you the set of evidence that will show the merit or the success of your program, whether your program or your national goal is being achieved? So the succeeding processes would be, of course, more of technical ones. You must have, of course, how to do the evaluation, for instance, and the manner of reporting. Who would come into the picture? Your partners. How would you sustain? How would you report? And how would we the take up? How would the decision making would be affected by it? So those are the things that would involve. You know. So there are kind of partners that would go in the picture. For instance, partners in the media, the partners, of course, the NGOs and many things, civic organizations that would come into it. S- Now,
Oh,
that is a very a broad, a very big challenge to set up national evaluation system and even agency evaluation system. One reference to it is, of course, the 10 steps identified by Ray Rees and Part and et al. They have the book 10 Steps. But of course, you have to see the context of the organization that you are trying to establish resource-based system in. It depends on your condition. But I think I have covered some of the main parts of it. Actually, my practice and my belief is that you don't go very dogmatically in applying those things step by step procedure, kind of a hard and fast rule. It's not in the actual practice. There are some context that you have to fit in. Mm. But I think the main components are there, things that I have said. One of that is, of course, the establishing the theory of change model, or the TOC that we say, where you would have the basis of identifying the outcomes. Of course, first the output, the outcomes, and in the outcomes, as I mentioned a while ago, it would have the short, the mid, and the impacts. Okay, and I think that's a point of confusion in many new practitioners when they hear about impacts and there's another outcome. Actually, you are talking of almost the same, although depending on the detail. Impacts are outcomes in general, because some other organizations use outcomes to refer to the midterm results. Results outcomes are the same, actually. But when you go into detail, you have the short, mid, and the impacts. The impacts are the long term. Okay? So I hope I am answering uh, squarely your question.
that's totally I you know yeah it's a very comprehensive explanation. But there's one thing I want to ask regarding the steps to implement RBME. I think you could be more you could be more elaborating in this part. Like once the findings like are generated, maybe from the TOC or in the steps within the steps, how can organizations make sure these are effectively used for decision making and continuous improvement?
Well, there are many suggestions actually, but it's a very difficult work to do, because you see we're used to doing a system that is old. We want to replace it with results-based M&E, and it's been the experience of many practitioners, even the whole M&E community. The uptake of results-based monitoring in governments is very tough, actually, because we are used to the old system politically, culturally, and I think systematically, structurally. Okay. Well, some of the suggestions would include, of course, support from the media, support from the people on how the results of RBME would be uh, taken by the policymakers and decision makers. But in our long experience, those policymakers and decision makers are sitting on top of the positions, on top of the political, spectrum, or even the corporate, or even in, you know, let's say public sector. They do not understand so much about results-based M&E because they don't undergo the detailed training. Only the middle managers, perhaps you say ASEC, but they sit only one day in a training and then go after 2 hours maybe. Those who are being subjected to training are the middle managers and the staff. But the decision makers do not comprehend so much about this. So there's the big challenge in having the decision makers and the policy makers decide on what to do. The incomplete knowledge and understanding and comprehension of what results-based M&A could bring, and especially depending on the country, just like in the Philippines, or maybe what's happening in the Philippines right now, just like what's happening in Indonesia, where there is so much corruption, right?
Let's
We have a parallel situation going on right now, and I think we are learning from Indonesians. Because of the corruption in the government, do not want this results-based monitoring evaluation to come in and being implemented. There are barriers because, they do not want transparency. Because if there is transparency, of course, corruption will not prevail. So that is the big barrier that I can see, political and cultural. Now, in a simple situation, for instance, in our organization, the uptake would be a little bit better because it's a smaller organization, say an NGO or a department in your government. If there are champions there and your boss would be, of course, converted to the idea of having these results-based benefits, then the uptake in decision making will be okay. But you go up the ladder, you go up the level, I think it will be, very tough. That's the main challenge. What else? There are so many challenges, even including in the M&E practice as well. There's so much confusion actually. Different terminologies, different explanations, you see. When you look at the old publications, main proponents of RBME, the definition of outcomes or results are just the same with output. But the very big difference with the traditional and RBME is that we have to consider that outcomes are different from the outputs for the sake of the principal application. That's the thing that people do not understand. They consider outputs as outcomes as well. So when you get to the theory of change, identify the outcome statement and indicator, that's where the battle begins. You will be confused. And just like what we are seeing right now, if you go to some organizations, there are a lot of indicators, thousands of them. How could you assess? How could you manage to really implement an evaluation when you have a lot of indicators? You are very much confused. Imagine deciding a beauty contest with 1,000 indicators. You cannot do that. The system would collapse. So the benefit of RBN is that it will limit your indicators to the sufficient number that you could judge whether the implementation or the intervention is performing or not, or successful or not, depending of the outcome statement and the indicators that you identify. Because in the process, you have to have representations among all. Ownership should be strong, that, okay, we agree with this indicator, we agree with this outcome statement, and that's it, we run it. So whatever we find in the end, that would be acceptable to us. Different from, say, a scenario that the theory change and also the indicators, the outcome statements are only imposed on those in the M&E department or in any sub agencies. That's very different. Okay, I think we can move.
Wow, I
You have
think
if you have some queries, sub queries about what I have said, please
yes, I
be
think Okay,
Thank you.
that's very useful. I think the key takeaway is that results based monitoring and evaluation isn't about just collecting data. Like it's also about making sure whether organizations are ready to use it. And I think it starts with knowing what capacity you already have, then setting clear goals through strategic planning, collaborating across sectors, and mapping out the pathways from activities to outcomes and impacts. Right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Because if
Yes.
organization or even the department, the people do not understand and comprehend it. Of course, there is this rejection, just like what are happening right now. The popularity of artificial intelligence. People reject it in general because they do not understand. Just like RBME, of course, because it's a new thing. Because you have to change everything in the planning and the execution, perhaps in your BAPINAS, you have to change everything, the way you report, the way you analyze, and the way you produce results. That's a very big change organizationally. And people are not, mm, they are not having appeal to change. They do not want change very much. Because it will have some different, implications in the way they live, the way they work, especially those in the top positions. That's why it's really a very slow process of uptake. Mhm.
Okay, so based on your explanation before, you have given a few examples of how the RBME, right? So could you share a real case where applying RBME made a significant difference in a project success, maybe from your personal experience, professional experience, and what tools or methods were especially important in that case? And when applying RBME across different sectors, such as maybe community development, environment, or governance, what unique considerations arise?
Okay, that's a big compound set questions, right? Now, there are reports that applying RBMNE, in particular implementation or evaluation, became successful. But we have to see the details of it because we are only referring to results. In the Philippines, I'm looking at how successful they are. There are reports, but the reports are, inconclusive to people in the practice because we do not see the process, how they do it. Only the reports that they are successful or not, that they achieve this or not. For instance, one thing that I believe, one result is reported by, the World Bank about the climate change intervention in India, that they are able to be successful applying RBM and E, something like that, or even agencies of the United Nations, or even uh, those things that are presented online. But AFO, by World Food Program, they said they are successful. But particularly in my experience, because of the slow uptake of evaluation, I don't see a complete application RBNB because they're still training the staff, the personnel. The complete application of RBNB, we cannot see even right now. Because in the Philippines, for instance, the problem, you have the executive, you can conceive the executive, but if there's no law established legally so that people would shift to implementing Airbnb, you cannot go broadly. It's only the executive. That's why the battlefield right now is establishing the law to pass in from to pass through Congress, approved by the Congress, by the Senate, and then later on signed by the president. I heard that some countries are successful in this, but we don't see complete details of how successful they are. For instance, we have this, you know, uh, SGD, right? Sustainable Development Goals that will end in 2030, started in 2020, 10 years. And they're still hopeful that in 2030 we will achieve the SDGs. But I doubt because of what has happened. We have the COVID, we have the slow uptake in the government, using only phrases, okay, this and that, but actually the backstage they're not applying it. But there's a big promise of actually it makes sense to apply a results-based M&E principles, focusing on the result. It makes sense. I still believe that it would be a better system that could apply in any initiative, intervention, policy, program, or project. But I have yet to see a detailed report, the methodology used, of course, the indicators used, and so on. Reports are coming in that they say they have increased income, they have increased awareness. Awareness is, of course, the the outcome, the short-term outcome that can easily be achieved compared to the income. But a complete successful program applied implemented using the RBME, we have yet to see in detail. Perhaps I'm not complete in my reading of journals. I still
That's
have
totally
to.
fun. But well, while RBME gives us a strong framework, so in practice, it's still evolving, right? And it shows that the challenges, the gaps, and the opportunities for learning. So with that in mind, let's turn to a real case to see how these ideas play out on the ground. So every approach comes with challenges, right, Professor? And in your experience, what are the most common difficulties in adopting RBME and how can practitioners overcome them?
Mhm. I think one of the challenges, of course, is the incomplete knowledge and skills about RBMDE, especially in the government sector. They don't have a chance of implementing it right away in their own turf. They learn, they go under training, but there are no opportunities to apply it in detail. They just got the learning. So for instance, in our government agencies, just like what you have in Bapinas, I don't know if they can separate from the work that they are assigned to every day and the evaluation. I don't think so. Because if there is a specific program that they can apply, that's it, better. So that's the challenge, shifting from the old to the new. And there are a lot of, or thinkings, a lot of processes involved. Even in the community of evaluators, there are arguments, there are debates about, the methodology being used, the approaches, or even the issue of evidence, the attribution to the intervention, whether the change achieved is attributed to the program. The issue of how do we know that the impacts are produced by the intervention? And there are a lot of debates regarding how to do that by way of quantitative method of analysis, say using different methods of determining the merit of that, using, for instance, do we use quadratic equations, something like that, or RCTs? Depends. There are so many. So within the community, there are still ongoing debates. For instance, about how change would happen, about transformative issues, something like that. And there are those who are actually uh, saying that TOC is linear. It's not good to use it. But I can see, those who previously disowned TOC, they're coming back and now use TOC as well. Those are the things that are happening. So we could see, a new application like this passes through really different kinds of issues like that. So that's the challenge among young people who are entering into the practice of RBME. You have to use critical thinking process in order to determine which is good, which is applicable. But you come across many different ideas. And as I have said, I forgot the author who says this. Ideas are fleeting, but logical reason stays. There are many ideas after there. Some are high falutin, balloony platitudes, but you could see whether they are based on logic.
So, okay, so what practical advice would you give to teams or practitioners who are just getting started with RBME, and how do you see its role evolving in the future?
Okay. My suggestion or advice to the young people like you is that continue studying different, views, different thoughts about Airbnb, especially the research part of evaluation. Because what you learn in the academies, the research, evaluation has its research part, evaluation research. When you do evaluation, part of the main part of it is to bestow judgment on the success or whether the implementation works or not. But part of it, you have to go into process of analyzing data. Before you analyze data, you have to get it. And there are, foundational philosophies. How you interpret the phenomenon, the social phenomenon, the socioeconomic phenomenon. There are many philosophies that revolves around that. For instance, ontologically or epistemologically, those are things actually we encounter in the academics. How do you interpret the social phenomenon, the socioeconomic phenomenon? How do you get the data? So there are actually assumptions in there. Are you part of the phenomenon, or are you an observer to the phenomenon? It has implication the way we understand data. No, that's it. So there are many things that people could learn. You could learn along the process. Don't get disappointed, but you could get the meat of it. And one way that you could really learn from it is join actual evaluation activity. You do not be satisfied with just learning and hearing about it. If you cannot evaluate do from the beginning to the reporting and different stages of evaluation, you cannot have a very good grasp on it. And there are many actually practitioners in the evaluation field that do not have actual experience, but they get the best position in evaluation community. And it's part of it, the growing up. Okay. So get the feel, the actual feel of it, and you will see what makes sense. Yeah.
That's
Answer
really
your
very good
question?
advice. Yeah, guys, that's a very good advice for me and for the audience, especially who just want to get diving into the monitoring and evaluation. So I think one of the biggest challenges in adopting RBME lies in the gaps of knowledge and skills, especially within the government institutions, right? And too often, practitioners only, get one-off trainings, but without follow-up practice or deeper understanding. And the shift from old approaches to new ways of thinking becomes very difficult. I think that's why critical thinking is important, and choosing what methods and indicators truly fit the context rather than just copying frameworks. And
Yeah.
I think perhaps most importantly that RBME is not one time exercise, so I think it's like a continuous learning process.
Yes, very nice.
Yes, yes,
A
and
work in progress after continuous learning process. That's a nice
yes.
word, that nice phrase that you have mentioned. Really.
And the more organizations study, apply, and refine it, so the closer they get to moving from outputs to genuine outcomes and impact, right?
That's true.
Okay,
That's
so
true.
yes. Okay, Prof. Romeo, so I think it's been like 45 minutes from our conversation, but I'm really enjoying the conversation because I've got
Brilliant.
so many knowledge.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think we can add some more. If yeah,
Well, maybe
if
we can make more
if you
episodes.
if you had some questions, just come back to me and
Yes, of course, of course. I would love to. So, I think overall, what I'm taking from our conversation today is that result-based monitoring and evaluation uh, pushes us to what is it to move beyond just counting outputs like roads or bridges completed, and instead ask the bigger question: Are people truly benefiting? Is there real impact, and is growth happening? Maybe like that, right? Uh,
yeah,
and well, I also understand that it's not always easy for governments to adopt, but the value is clear. Like RBME sharpens our focus, limits
yeah, that's right.
unnecessary. And yes,
Culture development of the
yes.
culture of critical thinking. Yeah.
Mhm. And as well, one thing that I like about your explanation is that RBME limits unnecessary indicators.
Yeah. Sorry again. Can you repeat that?
So RBME is limits the indicators.
Yeah, it needs indicator in order
Yes.
to apply the metrics, you know.
Yes.
And
So
the choosing of indicators are one of the major parts, actually. But of course, the choosing of indicators depend on how you identify the outcome statement. Now, this is actually a very big, the way I see it personally, the very big gap in the way people think about evaluation. Going back to SDG, for instance, if you're familiar with the SDG of the United Nations, right? We have how many goals? 17 goals, right? And what you can see in in the uh, in the framework that they have, they identified the indicators, right? Did they identify the outcome statement? There's nothing there. There are thousands of indicators, right? One first year, second year, and so on. There are some outcomes, but the outcome statements are not there. For instance, SDG number 14, is it about marine life or was it in? So the indicator is what? The outcome. The indicator is what? What do you see? Or saying the poverty, no poverty at all, right? But the outcome statement is not there. How could you identify the main indicators? Can you identify success using thousands of indicators? No, system would collapse. You cannot identify indicators of evaluation if you cannot identify the outcome statement. You cannot just use static indicators. And that's a big issue, People in the statistics department, for instance, in the National Statistics Office, for instance, they have data there. And sometimes the newest is 5 years old or 10 years old. And you are doing an evaluation of an actual implementation of intervention. You cannot use those. Those are static figures that are there that you could plug in from, but use those as basis only for background. What you need in actual evaluations is almost real-time data that you get from the ground zero source of data. That's what they do not understand. Because how do you identify the merit or the success, whether one is for if you use all data? That's why when the big data idea came in, many people were ecstatic, but they do not understand that those are only static figures. When you do actual evaluations, you need almost real time insofar as the evaluation process is concerned or the evaluation period is concerned. You just use the statistics data that are static for background and for perhaps triangulation, comparison. That's it. I think we're going back to the body of the
oh,
discussion,
that's
but there
that's
are a lot,
that,
There are
You
other
know, it's getting more interesting because you brought up about SDGs, which is also my my main consideration. Like SDGs have so many what is it? So many goals, yet we don't really see the what is it? Let's say the impacts. Let's say the impacts because like I'm also I was studying marine science, right? So I focus more on the SDGs number 14, but in the reality, we don't really see the the improvement in protecting the marine life. So
Yeah.
that's also my main that's also my main consideration. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think before applying like when you implementing the RBME, so it starts with readiness as well and clear strategic goals, right, and collaboration and building solid pathways with resources and evidence. And one thing that I highlight in this conversation is that the challenge is making the shift, right?
Yeah.
Like strengthening the knowledge and building skills and using critical thinking to choose what works best. But I think if we continue to study and practice RBME for like everyone, so this is why we made this podcast, because I think everyone should know how important it is, the RBME, especially in implementing the program or the project. So later, we
Mhm.
hope that it becomes a practical tool for better decisions and stronger
That's right. You're
policies.
saying it right. Yeah.
Yes.
You
Yes.
join many people, your colleagues. Yeah, you sharpen each other. You learn from each other.
Mhm, mhm.
Doing alcohol evaluation,
Yes. Oh,
and the
this
process is
is
refined, and knowledge is refined.
yes, yes, yes. This is such a good what is it a good conversation for me as a beginner and for everyone as well, and maybe for practitioners that have been in the monitoring and evaluation. I think that there will be so many new perspective or new insights in this
Yeah.
podcast, I hope. Okay,
And one thing
so
that I could advise, if you join, community of practices dealing with evaluation, there are a lot online. Yeah.
so can you give the example for me and for the uh the audiences how to get there, how
Yeah,
to
yeah.
find information
There's
about
something in the Yahoo group actually.
mm-hmm.
Uh, there is this I forgot. There is a community of practice and evaluation there that you could join. I
Oh,
think I
okay,
can
nice.
give to you the link or the sample in the WhatsApp.
Oh, hey, that's totally. I'm looking forward to it. Problem
There
you.
are evaluation communities that you could see the discussion there, or even FAO has its own Eval Forward, something like
Oh,
that. You could join and you could see the
okay.
development there.
That would
UN agencies, they have Eval Gender and so on. That's
that
what
would be
the way
nice. Yeah, because
UNO
mhm.
own, UNICEF has its own, and many.
Because monitoring and evaluation, especially in Indonesia, it's not really not that known in the most people. So it's a little bit difficult for me to like to find like a community like you mentioned. So I think
Indonesia,
so
because
yeah.
Indonesia is big. You have a lot population
Yes,
there. That's why.
yes,
But
that's right.
the way I understand it, the way I feel it, Indonesia is advanced in terms of MNE, RBMNE than the Philippines. I can tell that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
look,
I think
you have MONEV. You MONEV studio practice. MONEV
yes.
studio practice actually advanced and sustained practice of RBMNE, monitoring and evaluation. We want to do that as well, but we cannot do it in the Philippines. Our
Oh.
association. So it's very
Mhm.
hard to sustain it the way you actively do in MONEV. That's why I feel that you're more advanced.
From you, this is such a good conversation. I really love your your explanation because it's so comprehensive and uh it's for me as a beginner it's so easy to understand and to comprehend more about RDNE. But I have to as well, of course I have to deep dive into the RBNE more, and maybe if you don't mind, I would ask more questions
Sure,
after
sure.
this.
Yeah, feel
Okay.
free. Feel free.
Okay. Okay. So, Rob Romeo, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. I think our audiences will really appreciate the way you explained both principles and the practical applications of results-based monitoring and evaluations. And before we wrap up these sessions, is there one final message or key piece of advice you would like to leave for our listeners?
Well, I'm happy to be with you. Just a short conversation with Nisa or Sasa, and I think it's kind of. I hope it's very fruitful and beneficial to all. If you have questions, feel free to send to me, and I commend you, young guys, young people like Nisa, being interested in this, and I think you are the new generation that will continue to advance the cause of results-based evaluation or the M&E as a whole, because we need the young fellows to get in to get into the practice like you, and I hope all the best to all of you.
Okay. Once again, thank you so much, Prof. Romeo, for being
Thank you
here with
very
us,
much.
and thank you to for our listeners for tuning in. So this episode of MONEV Podcast will be released on September 12th. So stay tuned and don't forget to follow us in social media for more conversation on monitoring and evaluation. I'm Heidi Nisa, and this has been MONEV Podcast. See you next time.
Okay, see you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and listen to our previous episodes on MONEV Podcast. See you in the next episode.